My name is Matt Eichelberger of Eichelberger Law Firm here in Jackson, Mississippi. Our firm has two divisions, the Criminal Defense Division and the Workers' Compensation Division. I head up the Criminal Defense Division. We practice law across the entire state of Mississippi, and one thing we do a lot of and have for decades is defense of DUI charges. I want to walk through non-adjudication of DUIs under Mississippi law for you today. This is a little bit longer video than usual, and it's going to be broken down into sections. The first section we want to talk about is who qualifies for a non adjudication. It's fairly simple. It has to be a first time offender, meaning if you have been convicted of DUI in the past, you are not eligible. And it's not just in the past 5 years, it's ever in your life if you've been convicted under the laws of Mississippi or any other state. Additionally, if you have received the non adjudication in the past, and that means under Mississippi law or any other state's DUI laws, if you've received that DUI non adjudication at any point in the past, then you are not eligible for a non adjudication here. Also, CDL holders are not eligible. So that gives you an idea as to who is eligible. They have to be a true first time offender, and they have to be not a holder of a CDL, the commercial driver's license. Others are generally eligible. Now that we've talked about who is eligible, let's talk about how you actually get this opportunity. Now, just because somebody is eligible for DUI non adjudication doesn't mean that they are entitled to DUI non adjudication. It all comes down to the judge. The judge is the person who will make that decision as to whether or not to grant a first time offender that DUI non adjudication opportunity. And they get to set some parameters on that we'll discuss later. But ultimately, it is all up to the judge. Most times, it happens before a trial or anything takes place. Usually, what happens is we go in, having reviewed the discovery and discuss this with our clients. We then talk with the prosecutor, who we sometimes have to get to agree to go along with a non adjudication, and then we convince the judge to as well. Other times, and this is rare, we'll actually go through with a trial. And at the end of a trial, the judge can still place you on non adjudication if they determine, hey, you're guilty, right? So it's up to the judge ultimately, and that's how one gets on the non adjudication program. Another question we often face is how long does a DUI non adjudication process take? That depends on where you are and the conditions placed on you by the judge. It can be as short as roughly 4 months. There is a 120-day either license suspension or drug testing or interlock restriction period that has to be done as part of a DUI non adjudication under Mississippi law. Outside of that, there is nothing that stretches it beyond the 4 months that's mandated by law. Now, oftentimes, judges will require a 6 month probationary period or 6 months of drug and alcohol screening or up to 2 years of probation. They have that ability under the statute. So the answer to that question is anywhere from as little as roughly 4.5 months all the way to 2 years. Aside from the length of time, people also want to know how much it's going to cost. Well, that depends upon a lot of different factors as well. As you've already been able to see, the judge can add on a lot of conditions to a DUI non adjudication program, and that's going to affect the cost over the course of your non adjudication. There are some costs that are baked in. If you go with the non adjudication, there is a $250 non adjudication fee. So that is going to be part of it. There are also minimum fines and court costs that play in. So even at the very minimum level, it's going to be somewhat costly if you have to have an interlock restriction license with an ignition interlock device installed on your car, which we'll talk more about later. There's a monthly monitoring fee with that. If you're doing drug testing, there are drug testing fees that go along with that. There are fees for MASEP. There are fees for Victims Impact Panel. All of those things we'll talk about over the course of this video. But frankly, it can just be up to roughly $1,200 to well north of $3,000, depending on what all you have to do as part of it. Now, as I've already mentioned in this video, there is a period of license impact that happens as part of a DUI non-adjudication program. It's 120 days, and there are three different ways your ability to drive can be impacted in a DUI non-adjudication program. The first is the requirement of an interlock restricted license. This is by far the most common, and we'll cover that in just a moment. The second is a drug testing restriction on your license. That's probably the second most common that we see. And then finally, there is the suspension for 120 days. We'll cover all of those in just a moment, but those are the three different ways in which your license to drive can be impacted as part of a DUI non-adjudication program. Let's talk about the ignition interlock restricted driver's license option for a DUI non-adjudication. All right, we'll start by talking about the ignition interlock device itself. It's a device that's installed professionally, usually by like a car audio installer or a local electronics shop. They install it on the steering column of your car or the ignition of your car, and it requires that you blow a clean breath sample into a straw, into a tube, before it will allow your car to start. Now that you know what that device is, let's talk about the license restriction. If you are going this route, you have to have a special license from the Department of Public Safety, and it requires you to only drive vehicles that have this device installed on it. If you were caught driving a vehicle without that device and you have one of these restricted licenses, then that's the same thing as driving on a suspended license. And if you're in a non-adjudication program, it will also lead to you being automatically adjudicated. You'll be kicked out of the program and convicted of DUI, just like that. So don't go that route. Now, with respect to this license, you do have to pay a fee to get that license. And at the end of your time period, you'll go back and you'll get your regular license back. Now, let's talk about the way in which you go about doing it, because it's very important. If you've been ordered to go down this route and have the ignition interlock device installed on your vehicle and have that license for that period of time, the 120 days, then you want to first go get the device installed on your car. Now, I will warn you, some places require you to bring the court order with you to install that device, okay? Now, I don't think it's necessary under the statute, but some places require it. So practically speaking, take your order, the non-adjudication order, it's really called the order of conditions in most places, to the installer and have it installed on your car first. You want the device on your car first. Then you go to the Department of Public Safety and you get your interlock restricted license. Then, once you're done with your 120 days, you go in the reverse order. You go back to DPS and you get a normal license back. Then you go and have the device removed from your car. Why is it important to do it in that order? Because if you don't, then you'll be driving a vehicle that doesn't have an ignition interlock device on it after having gotten the restricted license. So you're in trouble right out of the gate, right? So that's not the way you want to do it. You want to go device, license, license, device. That's the path through on that. Now let's talk about another type of license impact we see in DUI non-adjudications in Mississippi. Instead of ordering a person to have an interlock restricted license for 120 days, the court may instead order them to submit to drug testing during that 120-day period in order to keep their license to drive. Now, We see this where there is some other source of impairment besides alcohol. And that's frankly a little more common than it used to be. And there are improved ways of detection for law enforcement over what we used to have. But if somebody is driving around not impaired by alcohol, then it makes sense that they be instead tested for the thing that is the source of the impairment. And that is how our laws and our courts deal with these other types of DUIs and a non-adjudication. It's a 120-day period where the person must be drug tested at their own expense instead of installing the ignition interlock device on their vehicles. Now, the third option for license impact that we see in DUI non adjudications in Mississippi is simply a license suspension. It's frankly pretty easy and straightforward. You make that decision, and the court will send its order to the Department of Public Safety, and your license will be suspended for a period of 120 days. There is a reinstatement fee that you have to pay at the conclusion of that 120 days, or else your license may remain suspended unbeknownst to you. So it can be a little bit tricky at the end, but it certainly is the cheapest option. Now, it's not the most practical option in 99% of cases, but sometimes it is the best way forward for people in this situation. Now, as I discussed earlier, there are other things that go along with a DUI non adjudication in Mississippi aside from just the license impact. The first one of those things is what we call MASEP, the Mississippi Alcohol Safety Education Program. It's mandatory, everyone has to do it on a non adjudication. And when you are there in court, you'll be given an order which sets out what day you're supposed to go to the MASEP program. Now, MASEP is a 4-week course. You have to go in order. You can't skip around. You have to start with class one, follow it by class two, and so on. And if you miss, you have to start over again. Now, it's about 2 to 3 hours, usually in the evening, could be during the day on a weekend. Now, if you cannot make that class that's assigned to you, or if the times or locations are inconvenient, then you can contact the main office for MASEP and they will give you other options. There is a fee to be a part of the MASEP class, and if you miss one of the classes, you will have to pay the fee again. Now, if you live out of state, there is the option for remote learning at a MASEP program. Now, that can be problematic. I've had clients have issues with it before, with internet connection, that sort of thing. And so it can be sometimes a little bit difficult. And if you live close enough to the Mississippi location where they're doing these classes, it may be beneficial to you just to go ahead and go in person to the MASEP classes. Additionally, we will accept in Mississippi other states' similar programs, but I will warn you, going to those can trigger unforeseen consequences. For example, in some of our neighboring states, it might require an additional 6 months or 1 year, 2 years of counseling in order to complete their equivalent program. So, to the extent you can do MASEP, that's what you want to do. Now, there's also potential for 48 hours in jail. That's almost always suspended in every case. Sometimes it's suspended upon the completion of a victim's impact panel. Not every court will require the victim's impact panel, but a lot do. That's usually just a one off class. It's where you go and you listen to people talk to you about the impact that drunk driving has had on them and on their lives. So it's a pretty powerful program, and it can be made to be part of your non adjudication. It is not always, though. There's also a non adjudication fee that has to, by statute, be paid. It's $250. That's part of just the requirement that you do. And it goes into the Ignition Interlock Device Fund, which is there for people who cannot afford to install the ignition interlock device on their car. If the court makes that decision that the person is indigent, then the money comes from that. Additionally, there can be probation in addition to Everything else I just outlined, in addition to the 120-day restricted license, in addition to all these other things, MASEP, Victims Impact Panel, and that probation can be for up to 2 years. In some courts in the Jackson metro area, for example, it's just mandatory, not mandatory, but it's customary that it's a 2 year period of time in which you are on probation. So that kind of can prolong the DUI non-adjudication and make it, at least in a time sense, more costly. Now, the judge can also order you to do things like community service, drug and alcohol education classes. In addition to MASEP, they can order drug and alcohol assessments, or really anything they see fit as part of the non-adjudication. So that's an idea as to what the other requirements might be for anyone's non-adjudication, and it varies by court. Now, what happens when a person finishes their DUI non adjudication program? Well, the first thing is that a judge signs what's called a final order of non adjudication, and that goes in the court file and it goes to DPS. What does it mean? It means that the person was not convicted of DUI, and that's very important for a whole host of reasons. Now, once that order gets to the Department of Public Safety, they maintain a confidential registry of who all has participated in a non adjudication program. And that's to prevent double non adjudications. It's there so that prosecutors and court clerks and law enforcement can check and see whether or not a person has gone through a non adjudication program before. Because if you'll remember at the outset, I told you that only people who have not had a prior non adjudication would be eligible. Now, after it's done, there is still a public record there of your DUI. The entire file in the municipal court or justice court is still there and can be accessed by anybody wanting to look. Some courts go ahead and enter an order of expungement, meaning that the court clerk wipes all those records clear, and some courts don't. The ones that don't generally don't have an issue going through and signing those orders somewhat quickly, though, and cleaning up any public record that's out there of the DUI arrest to begin with. So that's it. That's an overview of DUI non adjudications in Mississippi. I hope I've been able to give you a little bit of information that will provide you a little bit of peace of mind. If you have any questions or don't understand something or want some help with your DUI or a loved one's DUI, feel free to reach out to us. We do this all day, every day across the entire state of Mississippi. So don't hesitate to reach out and let us help you. Thanks.